Hello?
Hey,
Hey, how you doing, man? Nice to see you.
good. Good seeing you again.
Yes, sir. There's been, I think, in some circles, which I attempted to use to my advantage, a little um, wondering whether Doom Sword was pronounced Doom Sword or Doom's Word or any of that sort of stuff,
Mhm.
and I took advantage of that confusion in my marketing because that was free to do. So how do we officially? I don't want to butcher it. I want to know officially how we refer to you,
Uh,
Mister.
well, I would say Yang Yan Zhao, but many people would say Yang Yan Zhao, which is also correct, depending on if you have a northern or a southern Chinese accent.
Yeah, I didn't know that. When I was way younger, I worked in a I worked in a corporate Chinese restaurant, and
Mhm.
almost everybody was Vietnamese. We had various Chinese people, not nearly as many as the Vietnamese. Um, but I kind of like I'm sure I butchered it way back when because we were taught the menu and the stuff we should say to people when they entered the restaurant and hello, thank you, goodbye, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't know that dialect would make a difference because I would always say Zhao,
Uh-huh.
like ever since like Romance of the Three Kingdoms or whatever. I don't know if you ever played that, but
Yeah.
Zhu, Zhao, you know.
Yeah. So the ZH in like a northern Mandarin accent would be like a J sound in Jeep. Whereas in southern China, it's just a Z, like you don't hear the H. So it can sometimes be very funny. Um, like
Yeah, that's interesting.
like the name Zhang, Zhang, is like Smith for Chinese family names.
Right.
So had a teacher whose name was Zhang, and there was a lot of Taiwanese there, and they use the southern pronunciation, so they call him Zhang, Zhang teacher. But the thing is,
Right.
Zhang means dirty. So they keep calling him dirty teacher. He's like, no, look, you guys really have to stop that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, like I said, I always take the ZH to be
Mhm.
Zhang, thinking that I'm doing what's right. But I suppose for I don't know what the population difference is between northern and southern China, I might be doing wrong by like 60% of people instead of doing right by like 60% of people.
Uh, to be honest, they'll just be happy you could say it. Uh,
Right. That you don't say
oh,
Zang.
yeah, most white people, they look at like names on a roster and like, I'm calling you Bob, and you're
Right.
Sally.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so this is the way that you would so is it basically like I don't I don't mean to deep dive it, right? But is it
Uh-huh.
basically like a yin and yang type of thing? Is it
So there were two people in history named Yang Yan Zhao. One was a Song Dynasty general, and
right,
the emperor, he said, "Okay, you need to go fight this army over here." And Yang Yan Zhao, he said, "No, we're going to get our asses kicked. Their army is like 10 times the size of ours." And the emperor said, "I'm the emperor. Go do it." So he did, and they got their asses kicked. And he came back to the capital, and the emperor was like, "You got your ass kicked, so I should kill you. But you're a good guy, so I'll let you live." And then there's a famous what do you call it? Like Beijing opera called Yang Shilang, the 10 young the 10 young brothers. And the story is the father. So at that time, like there wasn't no national army. It was like my family has a army, your family has an army. Similar to medieval Europe, how the feudal lord would have to
right.
have their army, and when the king calls you up, you got to bring the guys to form like a national army and go fight whoever. So the Yang family, everybody hated them, and they were jealous. So they kidnapped the father, and then the 10 brothers went to go find him. And Yang Yan Zhao was the only one who came back. My kung fu master, he is the one who gave me this name, and he said it's because in the opera, Yang Yan Zhao is very good with the spear, and he said you're very good with the spear. But the true story is he thought it was really funny, um, because if you had a Chinese guy come up to you and be like, "Hey, I'm William Tecumseh Sherman," you'd be like, "What?" And so this is the
Right.
and so I started using it over there, just like on, you go to a restaurant, you got to give a name for reservations, and they'd be like, "Who's Yang Yan Zhao?" And be like, "Hey." And then I started using it on like government forms because for foreigners, they'll ask, like, "Do you have a Chinese name?" So I started using that. And then now in several countries, that is my legal name.
That is actually an amazing story. So I have so much to um, uh, say about it. I forgot the first point, so I'll just move to the second point. So you're what? You're like a legit badass? You have
Uh,
like a kung fu master?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
well, I did study it there for 4 years, and, I do technically, so they have a system where, you can become, there's like 学生, which is student, and then there's 弟子, which usually they translate to disciple, but if you think of it in mob terms, it's like when you're a made man and you officially get in the family. It's like that without the crime. So I eventually became the head of the school for North America.
yeah. That basically equates to legit badass.
Eh,
Um, well, I mean, I might be a decent, a decent puncher and a decent grappler, primarily due to size, but yeah. Anyways, so yeah, you can take me. So we've established that. Um, so anything else? I mean, so that was kind of like personal stuff,
uh-huh.
I apologize if any of that's out of line, but
No, no.
let me ask a question.
Mhm,
And I don't want to put you on the spot like this is some sort of interview or anything like that. I'm just
mhm,
genuinely curious because you were gracious enough to put me on your channel a couple of times and ask me questions about who I am and that sort of thing.
mhm.
And I would like to do the same for anybody else who comes along because uh, I really enjoyed that and I really appreciated it.
Oh,
So, what's the deal with the RPG hobby and stuff like that? Did it start out with war games? Did it
ooh, that's a good question.
RPG first?
Yeah, RPG first. Well, it's funny because way back in the must have been late 80s, late 80s or very early 90s. AD&D 2E came out, and I thought it looked like the coolest thing ever. I never played, and this was back before the internet, so and we didn't have any game stores near where I was. Plus, I couldn't drive, so like I bought all the books, and then I could never find anyone to play with. That time was like slightly after the peak of the Satanic Panic, but at that point where like it was considered so nerdy, like if you're talking to someone, you'd have to draw like a D20 on the ground with your foot in the sand. And if they didn't recognize it, you brushed it away real quick. Um, so I never actually got to play with it. I still have some of the resources. Like I show this book off all the time,
Oh yeah,
which to me is one of the most valuable D&D resources I have, no matter what edition it is. It's so great. But so from there, D&D was too nerdy, but for some reason Marvel superhero role-playing game was just fine. And that's really
right.
where I got my start role-playing poorly. And then I played that for a while and then got to college, got busy, had to work. And then it was 2017, I think. No, no, it must have been earlier than that. 2015, 2016. Got divorced, had a lot of free time. I was like, you know what?
Mm.
I think I'll try this. And as much as a lot of people are going to hate this, at that time, like I got really bad pneumonia. I was out of work for 6 months and I
Oh,
really couldn't do anything except watch crap. And I didn't have cable, so it was whatever I could find on the YouTubes. And that's exactly when Critical Role was starting up. And just by virtue of the fact that I couldn't move out of bed, I said, you know what, I'm just going to binge this whole thing. And then I was like, oh, this is cool. So then I found, when I was better, I found some gaming stores and I went in and started back. At that point, it was mostly fifth edition. And
right.
yeah, I've been playing D&D ever since. And I got the inkling to start writing modules and campaign guide not too long after.
Yeah, yeah, and that's great. So, just to take a step back real quick. So basically, your transition into RPGs came from comic books. You would say,
Oh, oh yeah, 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 for sure. I was definitely a comic book collector before I found the Marvel superhero role playing game, and it worked
right?
out perfectly that like it was right in the time when I was collecting, and I think the the role playing game came out like maybe 1 or 2 years before I found it. So when I found it, there was a nice brand new advanced edition, and they had
Yeah,
these really cool books. At Is that me? Is there something flying around here? At the time, Marvel came out with these books called Handbooks of the Marvel Universe, where they went through all the
yes,
characters that they ever had.
I love
Um,
those.
and at that point, it was only like 20 years of history because we're talking late
Right,
80s versus the 60s. And they took those books and they made them into basically like a monster manual where you had
right.
virtually all of the heroes and the villains who were in the Marvel universe at that time. So it was such a fantastic uh, atmosphere where you could really make any kind of story.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember those every once in a while, but those were my thing,
Yeah.
now, I got into RPGs by being introduced by them, but the first stuff
Mhm.
that I bought, for them was after, uh, I had bought comic books, right? So, I had
Yeah.
bought comic books in the very early '80s, and then I, go into the comic book store, you see the D&D stuff on the shelf or whatever, and, you get
See, that
you,
that was the
yeah,
thing around here. Comic book stores were for comic books, and then there were game stores for games, but there really weren't any game stores around me. At least not until I was probably midway through high school. So I think I started playing the superhero role playing game when I was probably seventh grade. So there was a good gap of years where the only people I had to play with were people I knew who were also interested in comics. And, we kind of muddled our way through the best that we could with the rules. It's not like we ever had anyone to teach us how to do it. It probably would have gone a lot better if we did.
yeah, right, and for me, I think it's matter of just a year difference,
Yeah.
even though those years weren't very far apart. Back then, generational changes could happen in a single year, it seems like.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
would go into the
Especially then.
comic book store, they would have D&D box sets in there. And then, I'd buy comics, I'd buy miniatures, I'd buy D&D box sets or books or whatever. And then one day I ended up coming back and seeing that there was a Marvel Superheroes RPG with brilliant like Jeff Butler artwork
Mhm.
that was just amazing. And then just a little bit after, I think it was a little bit after that, the handbooks to the Marvel universe or the guides to the Marvel, whichever
Yeah.
ones they were that you were talking about, those were they were just amazing.
Yeah.
the technical details about the character, how they would yeah, schematic sort of everything out. And it really was the monster manual for that stuff. And I looked into picking up that collection again a while back and then never pursued it. But one of these days I'll at least buy one for nostalgia.
Yeah, I liked them. The only thing that I did not like about those module or the reference books, I guess you call them, is they were 3-hole punched. Which just like the
Right.
2E monster manual is the absolute worst
Hmm.
if you're doing role-playing games because you're flipping those pages back and forth all the time. It's just horrible.
Yeah, yeah, and you get that with even like Moldvay BX and couple old couple other old supplements in the TSR verse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I never particularly liked that as well. Um
I
I
mean,
mean it's okay.
it makes sense. I understand why they would do it, but in the long run, like, oh, did I lose the owl bear page? What's going on? You know?
Yeah, right, right.
Well,
And
no
then
owl
and then
bears in
we
this
were all
campaign.
sitting there putting those little circular
Yeah.
hole protectors on the things, but they don't make a difference.
No.
You just use 1,200 of them for no reason, and spend hours and hours of time. Um, so yeah, in terms of stuff you've written and what you've done, I mean, I have a little bit of an idea myself, but in case anybody in my audience isn't aware of that, or yours for that matter, because I'm sure you're not inclined to talk about yourself on your own channel all that much. Um,
Well, when I'm when I'm getting ready to sell stuff. So
yeah,
first,
yeah, yeah,
I have created a campaign guide, and there are versions for 5E and 1E called Empire of the Undying Sun, which is
yeah,
a
yes.
horror campaign, mostly focusing on American horror, which was not intentional at first, but then very intentional later. And there's also a number of adventure modules which are coming out with it, which you could take them and plop them into any campaign if you want. They'll fit perfectly in Greyhawk or uh, parts of it'll fit in Chult, in some
Hmm.
stranger environments, but they also fit in to the campaign guide. So depending if you like to play more sandboxy or if you like to play, I would say like Dragonlance style, where I don't want to say railroad necessarily, but like a fairly linear storyline. A lot of these modules are designed to fit between events that happen the um, in the campaign guide, or if you're doing sandbox, they could just happen upon the area that these modules fit with.
Right. So when you uh uh, if I may, let me
Mhm.
ask my first question. If you were to take this and associate it with a particular historical time period or age, as far as mirroring the world to real world history, what would that look
Mm,
like?
that's a good question. Well, it depends on where you are in the game. So the area you start in there, to me, it's very American, and it's almost like a New England horror type of experience where there's something in the woods, there's something not right just beyond the edge of civilization, and they're kind of, I always think of them as like just pre-industrialization. um, so they'll have brick buildings, they have glass, but they don't have steamships, they don't have railroad, uh, no firearms. But if somebody wanted to, add that into their campaign, or they wanted to, allow players to have, a blunderbuss, or in 5e the artificer, if they want to make firearms, it would fit in fairly well. But then you go into other areas. like the Empire of the Undying Sun itself. And that's kind of a mix of like Aztec and Mayan and ancient Egyptian and Ottoman cultures. So it's it's more medievalish, I would say there. They're not quite as technically advanced. Now the beginning place, they their kind of their deity situation is very much like the Bronze Age, where like every village has their own deities, and like as those villages get swept up into empire, the empire just takes them all. And sort of like if you go to India today and you see Hindu temples and there's like 4,000 gods, yeah. So there is that aspect to religion in it, whereas the Empire of the Undying Sun is ruled by one god who does not tolerate others and constantly demands blood sacrifices. So it's kind of a mix. um,
Right. So is there a so there's a, so is there like a real world that sort of, or a surreal world that sort of represents reality, and then you can end up in some sort of alternate plane that's the Empire of the Undying Sun?
so the Empire of the Undying Sun itself, which is the actual empire, and the beginning area you start off, which is the area of South Bay, which is part of the Western League. Those are the real worlds. There is, however, a dream realm where I have special mechanics for that. Um, Mostly because I always thought the not the Arctic, what's arcane. Ah, dang it! Now the words escape me. Not the ethereal plane, astral plane. There we go. I always thought it was a
Astro,
little bit.
right.
I always thought it was a little bit lame. Like event, it just became like another place you go that just has a lot of clouds. So I wrote rules for how the dream realm works, so that it's made so that everybody, when they go to sleep, their mind automatically goes into the dream realm. And like
Nice.
if you ever had it where you and your friend had like you woke up and you're like, oh, we have the same dream. That's because you actually met in the dream realm. And you can speak to a lot of people there. You could be dead people, it could be people in other parts of the world. You can Gods will often try to speak to you in your dreams, but you can also have nightmares. And sometimes the nightmares will try to haunt you or even kill you in your dream. And if they kill you in your dream, your body is just comatose. Maybe something else might inhabit the body. You'd have
Right.
to see. So like, I have that as well, which is generally pretty optional. In the campaign guide, there's like one place specifically where it's like part of the story, just so it introduces it. And then it's up to players. I've had players like forget it and never go back. And then I've had people who go there constantly to try to speak with their deities, try to get advice, try to get special favors. And then I had one group who were very smart, and they went in there to become somebody else's Freddy Krueger. It was like they were trying to get there was a trial, and they were trying to get some of the jury members basically to vote the way that they want. So they would go into their dreams and haunt them as nightmares to sway the vote.
That sounds awesome. Hey, can we hit up a couple of these real quick? Because
Sure.
I want everybody to feel like a part of something. So, yeah, so a bit love it. That's what I was thinking, a bit Lovecraftian with regard to, the Dreamlands and stuff that happened with that, and even the Call
Mhm.
of Cthulhu role playing game that introduced the Dreamland supplement. Uh, you know,
Uh, yes, I would say that. The only thing I generally don't like to call it Lovecraftian because everybody says their stuff is Lovecraftian. So it
Right.
to me it kind of loses its meaning. But yeah, there's definitely, if you like Cthulhu, if you like the Cthulhu mythos, you'll probably enjoy this. There's a whole um, overarching theme where at one point the world was torn apart and it's kept separate by various barriers in order to keep a being from beyond the stars from coming into the world. And now someone, it seems, has found a way to breach the barrier, and so it's starting to come down. Which, your players don't know anything about that. They're just a bunch of goobers in a small town, and like weird stuff keeps happening. But eventually, that whole thing comes into it.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, most Lovecraftian stuff is sort of tethered into the
Yeah,
19th century. So
yeah,
we,
yeah.
talked about the little historical separation, at least
Mhm.
in years, with regard to that. And I don't think I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that I don't think that you revile seafood like Lovecraft did.
I'm sorry. I don't.
Do you abhor seafood? Do you hate seafood?
I'm
Because
actually
Lovecraft did.
so on seafood. I'm okay with
Are you
shrimp,
really?
and I like sushi, and
Yeah.
that's about it.
Well, if you like sushi, you like seafood. Gonzalo thought
I
we
do
were
not have a
an
tentacle fetish,
autonomous.
though.
Yeah, man, they get so chewy. Them, and the octopus is so smart. I feel bad for
Yeah.
man. The last time I had octopus was at a South Korean restaurant, and I
Ooh.
had barbecue baby octopus. And I just man,
Uh,
I ate it and I just felt so bad. They were like this big. I mean, they
yeah.
were good and stuff, but I just look at a bag of like 100 of them that they open up. They're like, "Here," and I have it with my sake or my plum or koju or whatever, and I'm like, "Man, I don't feel very good about this." So I suppose we're not an autonomous collective. Uh so, how big would you say your campaign world? Yeah, that's a good question, I think.
Oh, well, it intentionally only focuses on. So there's two continents. There's an eastern and a western. On the western continent, it only follows the small area of South Bay because you're, for reasons, that's where things are. And it does, the adventure or the campaign guide does mention other places, but we don't really follow with what goes there. In the Empire of the Undying Sun, that whole empire is mapped until, so as I mentioned, there's barriers that separate the parts of the world, and what happens is you eventually just wander into nothingness. Like there's the mountain range in the beginning area. If you go in the mountain range more than like a day's trek, you become hopelessly lost, and you'll probably just die in the mountains in sort of this barrier area. Now, on occasion, things will just by luck find their way through into another area. So there's, like in the beginning area, there's all sorts of legends about monsters that just appear, like in the swamp area near the mountains or in the forest near the mountains. Um, but it's not a regular thing because you can't intentionally find your way there. In the Empire of the Undying Sun, that's mostly desert. And then there's a long river that goes from the east to the west, and there's jungles on both sides. But if you go all the way to the east, and the river dries up, stops at one point, and if you keep going past that, you are lost in the deserts. The same kind of thing. But I personally have a lot more design in the world, but just trying to get this campaign guide out. So I haven't done too much more with it, just some basic stuff. But once I ship this and then I get into the second round of adventure modules, I'm going to be releasing more and more in different kingdoms or different areas of the world.
Yeah, and I wanna get back to that, but I wanna finish these up real quick because this one particularly calls you out. And I can't remember. Do you remember offhand what fugu is? Because great old ones mentioned
Mhm.
that. I can't remember fugu for some reason. I know what it is, but I can't remember it.
It's the sushi, but that fish has the poison in it. So Homer ate it once and
Right,
thought
right,
he
right,
was
right,
gonna
right.
die.
Yeah, yeah. We basically call them blowfish here or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I have not tried that, but
I haven't either.
I love uni. I love sea urchin, believe it or
Yeah,
not. It looks kind of horrible, but it is excellent. Um,
I agree.
yeah, this one, maps.
I got them. They're coming soon. The people who backed the campaigns, well, who backed the original campaign, they are getting 4 maps. So I've got one of the South Bay area, one of an ocean between the two landmasses. I've got the capital city of the empire, Fear Foralis, and the entire map for the Empire of the Undying Sun. It's coming.
Have you drawn all of these yourself? Are you the
Yep.
sole cartographer?
I am the sole cartographer.
Excellent, excellent.
So,
Yeah, I've got some of your stuff and watched you, draw inside warehouses and this sort of thing, and it reminded me of when I used to really do that and enjoy it. So it's sort of a cool experience, and that's a good way to provide art for your own book without having
yeah.
to put out the expense, right? Because it's not like
Yeah.
you've got diesel on staff or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is a good question, and maybe you have, or maybe you haven't, or I don't think you have. But what
Um,
do you say to this?
I haven't. I would actually like to get a group together and start playing it for maybe a weekly stream or a bi-weekly stream or something. But I just haven't found people willing to commit um, to that much time. Number one, and then number two, like I'm sure some of the people from my test groups would be willing to do it, but I just need somebody who's like a little bit comfortable doing it in front of an audience. Um,
Sure.
so there's that
Uh,
aspect to it.
right, right. But assuming that you can make it happen logistically and it would fit within people's schedules, I mean, how many players, and you wanted to do it, how many players would you say would be ideal for a situation like that?
Well, I would say minimum of 4, probably maximum of 6, just because it becomes hard for me to run it larger
Right.
than 6. But yeah, somewhere between that. I mean, I guess technically could do it with fewer and just have them use more hirelings, but it's at that point, I don't know.
Yeah, you probably wanna showcase the
Yeah.
the various classes and specialties and, skills and stuff like that, so more players would probably be better. That ties into something else,
Mhm.
what would you use as a VTT? Would
Um,
you use one? Would it be Discord, Theater of the
Yeah,
Mind?
I would probably use Roll20, just because that's where I've done all my testing. So I already have a lot of like maps and various stuff like that in there. No reason to reinvent the wheel, I would say. And it's okay.
Right, right, and, so do you basically feel pretty positive about, VTTs in general?
Yeah. I mean, I still think playing together with people at a physical table is the best experience you're going to have. But I used to live in Los Angeles, and I had a group that we ran a campaign for 3 years, and then for whatever reason, at the same time, a bunch of us just moved out of there. So even now we get together once or twice a month. And right now we're doing draw steel, and we'll play some kind of game, which there's no way I could ever keep together with my friends if it weren't for VTTs. So I don't see anything wrong with them.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm in a similar circumstance. I mean, I get to play with one person, for example, that I've known for 40 years now, d- just because of VTG. We used to,
Yeah.
I mean, all while we were kids for probably 25 years, we got together around a table. But if I can't do that in person with a person like that, then I would rather do that in any way that I can, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then there is a little bit of a, I would say, technical reason for it. I mean, so there's maps versus theater of the mind. If you like a little more strategic game, especially with the battles, like if I enjoy having my character run behind some pillars and shooting arrows there, or finding some rubble or something like that, then you're probably going to want maps. Excuse me.
Yes.
Whereas, I think theater of the mind is great, especially in terms of speed and efficiency. And if the DM is good, it's good color commentary. But the problem is, especially if you're dealing with like a large battle encounter, if there's in Empire, there's parts where you might have like 20 different enemy units and civilians all like there. Like, there's no way you could do that. Theater of the mind. It's just too confusing at that point.
I think I I think I set up this little tag here or whatever. I think I want to say that you guys hear that and see that it's like on the video because it's showing up on
Oh,
mine.
oh yeah.
Um,
Oh, I don't see it earlier.
yeah, I think that was a little setup for somebody subscribing or something.
Oh, cool.
Right on. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you heard? Oh,
Hell
I didn't
yeah,
hear anything.
guys. Whoever you guys are. Yeah. Um
uh,
yeah, and I don't mind theater of the mind either, and that's the big thing. If you're into some sort of tactical play or whatever,
mhm.
then the VTT makes it clearly apparent
Yeah,
what you're capable of doing without relying on DM adjudication that may
yeah,
vary from week to week. Plus, with theater of the mind, everybody at the table has a different mind, so they're going to have a
right.
different theater, right? But I like them both, and I've done them both. Ever since I was a kid, I always preferred grid and minis, always, even if the
Yeah,
minis were pennies, or something, or dimes or something like that.
yeah.
I always preferred that because I, even though I didn't really come from it, I feel like I have more of a wargaming background just because of my interests.
Yeah, and I mean, even there's a ton of spells. Like, if you're gonna cast Fireball, like,
Yeah.
if it's theater of the mind, I think a lot of times people sort of forget, and that's how they end up fireballing their own party. Or all the time it's up to the DM to adjudicate, like, okay, how many of the goblins are in the fireballs area of effect? If you have a map, it's much easier just to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another thing, and I don't want to make this some sort of evangelism of ETTs or whatever. But one other thing, I've got plenty of criticisms that I can levy at them, but one other thing that's amazing about them is how it actually exposes vision
Oh,
and
yeah.
lighting in a
Yeah,
way
yeah,
that
yeah.
people can understand, so it's no longer ignored, right?
Yes.
So even if I'm playing on a Chess X Mega Mat or whatever it is with the Stadler markers I used to use and still occasionally do, or or laying out some terrain or theater of the mind, there's a certain aspect of the vision and the lighting that
Yeah,
can't be captured by any other medium with which you can run the
yep,
game.
that's
Um,
true.
and I really, really like that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It does bring in new possibilities. I mean, I think as D&D has aged, um, it's gotten weaker and weaker in certain atmospheric aspects, such
Yeah.
as light. Uh, whereas I think in earlier editions you could make things like super creepy. There's something in the shadows. If you're playing most newer editions, like, Everybody's got dark vision, like, it's like, okay, whatever. You're in a room. It's not creepy. You can see everything. It's fine.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think dark vision, it did a lot, kind of on its own to sort of harm
Yeah.
that creepiness in a way. Um,
Yeah.
but I suppose that's debatable.
Yeah. I think, especially recently, I've seen more and more people complain about different aspects of 5e with things that I don't remember, especially from the earlier years of 5e. Like somebody saying, "Oh, well, they got rid of spell components." Like, no, no, those are still there. And complaining about the pre-made backpacks make it people don't respect their inventory or something. It's weird stuff, and I've come to realize that it's really a DMing issue,
Yes.
where, like, if you just let them get pile that stuff, and even technically, dark vision, in certain places, it says it's not, you can't see in total darkness. It's you can see in low light, which
Right.
makes a lot more sense. But everybody uses it just as like, yeah, I can see everything in the dark. To me, that's a DM issue.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And even we go back to 3.5 or Pathfinder,
Mhm.
whatever. We've got low light vision and dark vision, which are two separate things. I would
Yeah,
prefer that they would just be infravision and ultravision, or
yeah,
whatever you assign to creatures that can naturally sort of see in the dark better than humans can. Uh,
mhm,
but once you flatten it all out and everything in later editions, and basically every race has it or whatever.
yeah. That's the other problem.
Yeah, yeah. Now, on the other hand, in older editions, right, lighting was really only a problem for a couple of levels anyhow. Okay, but those were the levels where you established the tone and the tenor of the
Mhm.
game, particularly for new players, right? So, new players, you describe the creepiness, it's all dark and all this stuff, and then suddenly they get the opportunity to cast a light spell, or even
Yeah,
better yet, a continual light spell, and now the darkness is never a problem as long as that character and that item are present. They still had to come up through the ranks and experience. And like I
yeah.
probably mentioned before, particularly in the last video on your channel, I think that's one of the big appeals that drove Shadow Dark's success. Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, part of it too, the more research I've done is like, if you go back to basic and even 1E, there's like a very limited amount of things that you can do. And then they keep coming out with more and more books where they want to add on to it. Like, 3.0 was relatively small. And then in 3.5, they added a ton of new rules, and hero classes and this and that. And I think that there's always like a balance where the people who are playing, they always want more and they want some novelty, and maybe there are legitimately some missing rules that could make the game more fun in certain circumstances. But then the problem is, then you're expected to know so much. It's very difficult for new players to come in, which is one thing I think where the 2014 version of 5e did very well is it reduced a lot of the complexity and made it very easy for new people to come in. Um, and then as we've seen after 10 years, they're like, let's make everything far more complex than it needs to be. And they
Right, right.
flailed around with 5.5.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really always the case, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that they need to sell books, and
Yeah.
ever since it became clear that books and more books are the way to keep the brand alive, uh, which happened in the early to mid '80s. we've been left with sort of that approach to publishing of RPGs, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. But at the same time, there's nothing to say that you have to buy the book or you have to
Yeah.
use the book. Although, if it's if the player buys the book, particularly if you're using a VTT and something like D&D Beyond, they're like, hey, but
Yeah.
I bought this class, man. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah. Yeah, guess you should have asked me before you bought that class, you know. Um,
For sure.
but I used to trust the books enough to tell my players that if you buy the book, we'll sit down together and we'll review it and come up with something that works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Gonzalo hates the dynamic lighting. I mean, I know he's at a disadvantage because he can't
Yeah.
respond outside of text in the chat or whatever. But once I reveal something, I can just tell them they have no idea what is going on there. Dynamic lighting just slows things down. Right. So is that maybe because of the complexity of the map and like there's objects on the map or something where the dynamic lighting reveals something that makes the player think, hey, there's some crates over here. I'm going to go check them out.
Yeah.
Or I wonder if it's because for my maps, I make my maps and they've got walls and they've got floors and they've got doors and that's all they have. There's no furnishings in them, no anything. And I think you're kind of the opposite. And if I were drawing them myself, I might do the opposite. Have you found that having furnishings on your maps um detracts from your storytelling capability? I imagine not
Um,
if you're drawing them, right? But I'd be
yeah.
interested.
Well, it's an interesting question because I'm having that dilemma now where there's going to be like different versions of the maps depending on who you are. Like obviously the DM, they should have the version where like all the traps are located and where all the good loot is and secret doors and stuff. Whereas the players should not have that. It should just be more bare bones. But I do think if you have various furnishings and accoutrement, I suppose you'd say, like piles of hay in a barnyard or whatever. I think it can really help people like visualize it and sort of set the mood, so to speak. Also, it does take some of the heavy lifting off of the DM, especially if you have new DMs or, frankly, some DMs are just not that good at describing things, even when the
Right, right.
description's in the book. So it does help that. I have been debating, though, like, should I draw, like, let's say you're in a tavern, should I draw the tables on the map or should I draw tables separately? And then have the like cut them out and then just like place them on the map so then they're movable. um because one thing is let's say there's a secret door under a bed. Well, you're going to want to move that bed, and if the
Right.
bed is on the map, you're just describing it, and maybe it can be confusing for people. And then also, what happened to the bed? Did you push it against the door? Is there enough room to move it in this tiny room? So,
Yeah.
I'm still kind of debating that. But luckily, I'm going to have downloadable map packs for all the areas in the game. Mostly because it would be too expensive. I would need too many pages for all the maps that need to go in the book.
Yeah. Particularly with like print on demand and stuff like that for people who purchase
Yeah.
afterward. They don't
Well,
they don't want 100 pages of stuff that they don't want, right? They might
yeah,
prefer to buy a bundle or something.
and also the book itself is targeted to be 450 pages, and it might be over that. But it's real hard to get anything printed that's over 500.
Yes.
So so just to actually get the thing printed, like some things have to be taken out from the inside and put on the outside. And I think printable battle maps are pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I think so too, because you've got the opportunity to print it out in 8 by 11 or 11 by 17 on your black and white or inkjet
Yeah,
printer if you want to. But you can also take this stuff to like a rip printer or something like that, a print shop, and print it up much bigger, provided you've got a nice resolution and
yeah,
and whatnot. Yeah, and that's always, I mean, that's sort of what you just described with the concept of, okay, I've got a map. Do I even have the bed on there? And if I do have the bed, then should it be placeable somewhere else on the map so that I can see that that sort of balance between minimalism and complexity is something that we all, I think, anybody who cares about these games, thinks about on a regular basis.
yeah.
And I like that you think about that stuff,
Oh, thank you.
and Gonzalo's right, GM bringing the story can offset a lot of really
Yeah.
anything regarding players, whether they want more abilities, whether they want different races,
Well,
more complex maps and stuff. But
uh,
now I don't play with people who bought all the stuff on D&D Beyond, so I don't know how they're like to react if I don't allow their Toral um, uh,
ninja.
artificer or
Yeah.
whatever, artificer ninja, right?
Yeah, and I mean too, um, this might sound bad, but in some ways you have to think of players as like kids, who if you let them would only eat ice cream 3 times a day, as opposed to like, you got to get some nutrition. Like at some point, the DM has to set limits, or like, what's even the purpose, especially for a long term campaign. Like I always like the campaigns where the characters progress both in physical or ability properties within the game proper, but then also like their reputation, or their with relationship with their deity. They go from being just a peasant to a knight to a lord. So for me, like that's a lot of the stuff that I enjoy. So you have to lower the abilities in the beginning. Like in Empire, it's specifically designed so, especially the first several levels, the player is always on the back foot. They're they I've gone through and like most of the quest rewards early on, like if you get like 20 silvers, you're like, yeah, we got money, baby. And then like when you get that first gold, it's like, yes, I'm rich. Um and that's done for a specific reason. One is I don't want them to have too much stuff. I want them to be resourceful and have to scrap around. And if they defeat a thug with a really nice spike club, maybe that's better than the regular club they have, and that's kind of an upgrade. um and then story wise, like they have no idea what's going on in the world. To them it seems like there are random events happening. And then there's points where they're like, oh, now all of this makes sense, and they can put things together. And if you just give them everything, give them all the abilities, give them all the knowledge, you really rob them of that joy of like, yes, I can finally afford that breastplate or the sword plus one. If it's unearned, then it's just not that fun.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because as a DM, I think and we as DMs, those of us who do it a lot or have done it for our entire D&D careers, for lack of a better word, tend to forget, or tend to have maybe even never realized that there's a certain arc of enjoyment,
Mhm.
for the players. And a lot of that comes from, it really comes from gaining meaningful things for their
Yeah.
character that levels them up or whatever paradigm is involved in the game to represent progress.
Yeah.
And then also, the purchasing of items and all that. It's not really much different than anything else that's come after it. I mean,
Yeah.
even old video games, even side scrollers, like Black Tiger or something, you could go into the shop and spend some zennies or whatever
Yep.
they were. And it's just a lot of fun for the player. And I think it's important to remember those things and try to player focus on them. So supplements that lightly at least instruct novice DMs to do that same sort of thing and provide value for items that might otherwise be considered normal
Mhm.
is a good way to go, and it sounds like that's kind of what you did. So so why did you, because I haven't been able to ask you this personally and I'm intrigued by it, but why did you choose 5e plus 1e? Like,
Well, so when I started writing it, I was playing 5e, and it's been so long since I started. 5e was still
I know that feeling.
was still relatively new back then. And I'm sorry, 1e guys and bro SRs, but 5e is the number one selling version of D&D of all time. There's a lot of people who really love it, and one of the reasons why I wanted to write it is everyone said, like, well, you can't really have a horror game in 5e. So I said, hold my beer. And when I really started to put together a whole, like, okay, I'm going to make the campaign guide, I wanted it to feel like 1E games did, where at that time I had not heard of Shadow Dark. So I wanted it to feel more dangerous. I wanted it to feel like there's more stakes. Also, 5E, I think it's a legitimate criticism that after like level 11, it gets kind of boring. And the reason is the earlier editions, they had domain play. Like you're getting more famous. So all this loot you get, well, okay, you need a place to keep it. So you buy a keep. And then the lore of the area is like, yo, I need you to make sure there's no goblins attacking this area or whatever. So now you have responsibilities outside of just killing stuff and getting gold. Your responsibilities and your reputation keep growing, and it offers different style of play. And one reason why 5e, the later levels, kind of suck is because you don't have that. It's just more groups of monsters with bigger bags of hit points. So I wanted to take a lot of those older ideas and bring them into a 5e setting. So then I ran the first campaign, which is 5e only, and then for the next year, I had a follow up campaign because I did not do the first one very well. So it was kind of like a second chance. And since the game was meant to feel like a spiritual successor to 1E, I said, I think I can make this 1E. And I think for 1E players, having a totally new campaign setting, um, like no one's made a new Greyhawk or a new Ravenloft or any of those kind of things in quite a while. So um, I thought that would be interesting to some old grognards.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think that's a good approach. Why not like BX or something like most of the OSR does? Was it mainly the
Um,
idea that AD&D had a bit more complexity and options baked into the rules, or um
Yeah. Well, another thing is when that will make probably both 5e and 1e players angry is
that's
the more
that's what we're here for.
the more I looked at the two, it's like, wow, this is really kind of the same game. There
It
really are
it
not
is.
that many differences. There are some
There really
notable
aren't.
and some important ones, but they're mostly the same. And then also I figured, well, when they do 5.5 or whatever, it would be easy to convert from the 5e version to a future version. And then the same thing, I think if if you do BX and you get the 1e version, I don't think it would be very hard to convert it back um, to the earlier editions.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that actually wouldn't be that hard at all, and just to make them more mad, and since you brought it up, I've owned 5e since it came out. I've played every edition. There's nothing I haven't played as far as D&D goes. And revisiting the original 5e materials,
Mhm.
the core 3 books, DMG,
Yep.
PHP, MM, just recently, I realized that it was sort of the most pure version of AD&D since 3.5. I think 3.5 was the version that wrapped all of the things that AD&D didn't mentioned but didn't meaningfully represent in terms of complexity. 3.5 did that, and 5e um, kind of took it in the other direction and made a really playable, smooth version of AD&D. So
Yep.
I find these arguments about AD&D versus 5e kind of strange
Yeah.
because AD&D 1e, okay, 2e was nothing but a paint job, right? But 1e, 3.5, and 3.0 to a lesser extent,
Mhm.
3.5 and 5e core are really different representations of the same game, and they're all
Yeah.
worthy of a significant amount of merit, um, which is
I think
which is
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the um yeah, he's probably like waking up somewhere. Something's wrong. I have to investigate. But I mean, especially if you go into the 2014 5e DMG, there's all sorts of alternative rules in there that
Right.
really make it even more like 1E in a lot of ways. Um
Yes. The
and
DMs gave it
yeah,
away, They
well,
said, "We're not gonna use that optional rule because the players don't want us to use that optional rule,"
yeah.
and everybody just sort of, sank with the ship.
Yeah, and I think, really the big problem is, well, a lot of people aren't going to like me saying it, but it's the people who came in with 5e. There became a lot of other stuff. Like the thing is, like I call them like the Tea Party crowds. Like they're more interested in being a barista than killing dragons. And
Yeah.
to me, the thing is, that's fine. If that's what you and your friends like to do, and D&D is just sort of like a fantasy town generator for you, I don't have a problem with that. The only time it becomes a problem for me is like when you try to force that on me. Like
Right.
for me, the best form of D&D, of the rule set, is when it is just a very generic rule set that then can be applied to different settings, like the Ravenloft setting or the Dark Sun setting. And maybe you need a couple extra rules, like here, um, like I don't think 5e really has a lot of like ship rules in it. So like if you wanted to do
Right.
pirate campaigns and you had another supplement that had that, I'd be fine with that. But it's more it's weird. It's the idea that everybody has to play the same way. And of course it's the way that they want to play it that it has to be.
No, of course.
And that's the big problem for me. It's like great when everybody's playing a little bit differently.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree completely, and I think that's the message that's sort of been preached from the very beginning, by Gygax himself. Except the times when he didn't say that for various reasons. But all of that stuff, and I would agree that I would argue the same thing with 3.5. 3.5 core, the
Mhm.
3 books, just like AD&D core, 3.5 core, and 5e core really captured the essence. I would argue, like we talked about before, that there was actually some meaningful stuff that was added in the Orange Line books
Yep.
to 1e that had that stuff been used in the spirit that it was intended, would have potentially made 2E core books a better, longer lasting product without the necessity for additional splat books. But I think 3.5 and 5e both really got it right. And yeah, there's a lot of people who don't like that and and might not like either of us for saying that. But I'd gladly run a 5e campaign, just going on the record, and have thought about starting one because it brings you back to a nice, clean version
Mhm.
of what basically amounts to AD&D.
Yeah.
Um, in a way that's easily teachable. And I think that's why a lot of people, I think for a while, like the BroSR and stuff, they started talking about OSR as O5R instead of OSR
Uh-huh.
because they would use the basis of the 5e rules. And let's not forget that Pundit, RPG Pundit, it
Mhm.
was involved with Mike Merles in the consultation, and other less savory individuals might have been involved. And but that really guided, and I think Mike Merle's heart was in the right place, just as Monty Cook's was at the time that those rule sets were developed, and just as
Yeah.
Gygax's was, and Doug Niles and Ken Mohan and the others.
Yeah, and I don't know if you follow Mike Mearls, but since he was basically sidelined for reasons,
Yeah,
maybe political reasons, maybe not at Wizards. But then after he came back and he's been writing a lot about the mechanics of 5e and like what doesn't work. And it's very clear to see that there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with like what went wrong with like bonus actions, what went wrong with um like the CR rating for the monsters never seems to be challenging enough, and
right.
like what you can do to fix them. So it's interesting to see, how like rules by committee sort of water down what probably would have been an even greater version. But overall, it was pretty successful, I think. Yeah, I saw that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it was obviously very successful, being that it's the most successful,
Yeah.
from marketing perspective version of D&D ever. And it was also very successful. I wasn't really thrilled with a lot of the art choices inside
The
the
2014
books.
or the 2024?
The 2014. I liked
Oh,
them. I liked them, but I felt that there wasn't enough, and everybody's gonna hate me now. I feel like there wasn't enough male human fighter
yeah,
influence
yeah.
in the book. And I always used to be able to get that from before. But those choices don't bother me too much. Things that they did later bother me a lot more. But I feel like not only was it super successful in terms of commercial success, but it was successful at bringing the game back. And I like 4E.
Mhm.
I like 4E. I think it's great for what it does, but it brought the game back to its roots, and
Um,
didn't mean to sidetrack if I
no,
did.
no. So Michael says Stephen McFarland spilled the beans about 5e just being a hodgepodge of mostly 4e, some 3.5 sprinkled into it. I never played 4e, so I can't really speak to that. But I see a lot of AD&D 1e in the 2014 5e, at
There
least in
is.
the first three books.
And the first print, because there are
Yes,
changes between them. I've got a
yes.
first print and like a 12th print, and they're a bit different.
Yeah. So I maybe, I don't know, but there's a lot of the older stuff in there. Yeah, I can see what you're
Yeah.
talking about with the art. Um, eh, I mean, I thought overall it was nice. It had a good vision. Um, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, personally, something a little that had more like darkness and creepiness in certain areas too, I think would have been better. Um, and the thing is, if you look at when it was written and published, things hadn't things the general public hadn't gone so crazy at that time. So it's not like it was designed for those people in mind, like later books are. Like, you can look at like the
Right.
tacos and hamburgers from Heroes Feast in this 2024 version, and the Mexican orcs. But um but I can see where those kind of people would sort of glom on, whereas maybe they wouldn't have had stuff been a little bit closer to 80 style art.
Yeah, yeah, and that might not have even been any sort of conscious decision. I'll say
Yeah.
from the perspective of publishing and my interaction, because I've had to serve as the IT guy for publishing houses in
Mhm.
the past and deal with Mac using creative directors and there's all these types of guys, and
Yeah.
and the Final Cut Pro guys and all of this kind of thing, and deal with their persnicketiness.
Yep.
Um, but I will say that the creative direction on the whole of those core books was really good, right?
Yeah.
At least the art for the most part was similarly inspired and had a sort of a cohesive feel, even if you
Yeah.
don't end up liking that feel so much or wish something else had been put in that hadn't or wish something that had been taken out and something else put in. I feel like it had a cohesive feel, the
Mhm.
layout, all of that stuff, and they're really well written and all of those kinds of things. And I find no real uh I take no real issue with them in terms of presentation and rules. So define splat. Well, let me say one more thing, and I didn't mean to take over because I just remembered now what I was going to get to, but I started being long winded. Two E's: art direction, creative direction, uh, artistic vision. Uh, Here's where everybody else hates us. You by association with me, and me by just being me. Almost everything about 2E was generally crap. Okay. They
Mhm.
fixed almost nothing. They added some clever ideas, but it was a design by committee. Like you said, I think, if I can borrow that term, and it it did nothing meaningful except produce a new imprint that wasn't associated with Gygax.
Yep.
And I meet lots of guys and I talk to them all the time, guys who love the art direction of 2E and stuff. For
I'm
me,
one of them.
in the core books,
Mhm.
there's like 5 pieces of art out of like 500 pages that I really like. The little
Mm.
blue stylized, blue and white stuff, font selection, everything about
Yeah.
it as a designer, I very much dislike.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. But I mean, that was kind of the best era. You had the four greats, and it seemed like everything was firing on all cylinders, art wise, at that time. But yeah, that blue text was hard to read.
It was very hard to read, and if they had actually see, my particular problem with it is that the artists who were the old school artists were kinda out of the stable by that time, right? So
Yeah.
if we had actually had, Larry Elmore, Caldwell, Keith Parkinson, and somebody that I'm going to forget right now that's going to piss people off,
I know.
and I'm going to get
I can
hate
never remember all 4 at the
comments.
same time.
Yeah, yeah. Come on, man. Keith Parkinson and anyways, the other dude, Jeff Easley, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sorry for calling Easley the other dude. Okay. He's easily like a Sunday morning or whatever. If those guys had all been involved and TSR hadn't been on some sort of maybe not maybe some sort of not paying the artists kind of kick, or maybe they couldn't pay the artists or whatever. I feel like we would have got a better product if we had taken the artwork of Beckme and the artwork of AD&D First Edition and combined them into something that became a really brilliant and beautiful second edition. I would have appreciated it a lot more.
Yeah, 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 I agree. That's a good point. I don't know. The whole history of D&D is such a mess, you know? Like it's never really working well at all times. Um, and it's interesting, sort of getting back a little bit about various mechanics choices, in 1E versus like 3.5 or 5E. I think too that people forget that a lot of the stuff that they were doing had never been done before. So I for me, I forgive Gary et al. For some of the earlier parts that are a little clunky or don't work as well. Or you could see, especially with some of those orange spine books, they're like, oh, let's try this, and there was no real way for them to determine like long-term viability. Whereas like now we look back on it where with basically 50 years of game testing, and we'd be like, yeah, that rule's not so good, or
Yeah.
you know uh so in some ways it's hard to judge the older stuff because it was the first time, and it seemed good at the time.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's an interesting contrast. And I don't
Mhm.
know if what Gary put down and other people put down in 1E was stuff that was primarily informed by prior play experiences. Having
Mhm.
people over every day and playing all night, all day, every day, with big groups and all that.
Mhm.
And what else was just like some sort of preternatural genius or something, but I would have liked to see the same thing in 2E. Now, I think we did get that in to an extent in 3.0, and then 3.5 we got real original ideas. Now, um yeah, with the art in the monstrous compendium,
Mhm.
I think most of that was Holloway and uh, Tony DeLizzi and somebody else or whatever. But I felt the art direction was nice in that book, and that the pieces complemented each other.
Yeah.
And Monster Manual 2 didn't even really do that as well as MM1 did. Um, but yeah, yeah, I mean, I like the systems. So that goes into Michael's. I love the 2E art. Yeah, lots of people do. Uh, that was how my early group felt about 2E. Not enough change
Yeah.
or improvement. Yeah, yeah. For us, and for me in particular, I just always knew anything that was new.
Oh, is it me or is it you?
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. I don't know. You were like freezing up and then speeding up real quick. I don't know if that's on my end or on
Oh,
your
it might just be the way I talk.
end. No, no, no. It's definitely a computer issue.
Oh, okay. Uh, 3.5 was way too busy. It's busy.
I I don't know. I didn't like the art design, but I never played it and I never really looked through the books that much. I really don't like the covers. They bother me for some reason.
Yeah, and the 3.0 and 3.5 books have different covers,
Hmm.
and they're both I don't really like, much either one of them. And then we
Yeah.
got, No Assassin or Barbarian for better or worse. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did end up introducing barbarians and whatnot, um, in, kits in the Complete Fighter's Handbook, and then, of course, in 3.5. I'm just gonna show
What
these,
What's your opinion on classes? Like, what's the optimal? Should there be like very few classes and a lot of subclasses, or there should be a lot of classes? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question because I did have fun with the kits and whatnot that were in 2E, but I've always also felt that the core classes can
Mhm.
just be played in a different way to achieve the same sort of concept without
Yeah.
codification, you know. Um, so, like, if I'm playing a fighter, maybe he's a fencer, maybe he's a barbarian, maybe he's a gladiator, maybe he's a swashbuckler, maybe he's a pirate, maybe he's a military veteran, maybe he's a pikeman, maybe he's an archer. He could be anything,
Yep.
right? And it wasn't necessary to really assign attributes to a specific thing because you could take that ad nauseum into whatever direction, but I understand the allure. What do you think?
Well, I think if it's going to be a class, there has to be a very distinct play style versus other classes. Like, with a fighter, you are doing something, you are jumping in and you've got a weapon, trying to kill the bad guys. If you're a magic user, um, you're using spells instead. And I'm okay with like so there's like the thief in 1E, and it's a in a lot of ways it's kind of like a lame version of a fighter, except now you get all these other abilities that make outside of combat easier. And very similar with the ranger, although I think the ranger's still pretty good at fighting. But and a cleric versus a magic user, the cleric, it should be very much about uh, like achieving your god's goals, as opposed to a lot of people play. It's just like another version of a magic user with like better looking clothes or something. Um,
Yes, yeah.
so so to me that's the difference. Um, like I saw an interview with Chris Perkins talking about 5e, and he's like, "Yeah, we screwed up where we made too many classes." Um, and because like, what's the difference between a sorcerer and a wizard in 5e? Well, it's like there's like minor play differences, but it's not that much. So to me, like, I don't necessarily have a number of classes that is correct or not correct. But when you look at later editions, things like a warlock, well, a warlock is basically the same thing as a cleric, except with a cleric, you are praying for divine powers to give to aid you in some way. Whereas like a warlock, there's like a quid pro quo. You are getting like a very specific contract for I'm getting X power for doing Y thing for you. Like it's all kind of the same. Um, so for me, I like that. And then I like one thing I really like about 1E is you have sort of the actually, I don't know if like super class or hero class is quite the right term, but like, paladin or bard is something that you kind of level into as opposed to just start out with. I kind of wish some of the later, or well, I shouldn't say some later, just at least 5e. I wish they had gone that way, because again, I like stuff where there's progress for my character. Like paladin should be like I'm hoping to, one day achieve the goal of becoming a paladin. Yeah, that sort of thing.
Right, right. I have a child talking to me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree with that assessment. I think the idea of it being a complete separation, right? So
Yeah.
let's take the fighter paladin example or
Hmm.
whatever. So we've got the fighter and the paladin. They're absolutely different. The fighter has very little restrictions, basically no restrictions in terms of what he's capable of doing. And the paladin has serious restrictions on even being able to become one in the first place, and
Hmm.
serious restrictions on behavior. And if he reverts from those, then he becomes a fighter, right? Now,
Yeah.
let's take the concept of some sort of buccaneer or something
Hmm.
sailing the high
Yeah.
seas. If you put restrictions on that guy that says, hey, if he's not on the ocean, then now he's a fighter. Well, he was just a fighter on the ocean in the first place,
Yeah.
right? So there's a big difference there, and I think that would be a good sort of I think that's a good demarcation point between what should be a class and what should just be flavor. No, I don't
Yeah.
mind the kits in 2E, and I certainly don't mind if anybody wants to take those and sort of bring pieces of them into their game, particularly being that 2E was more a lot more skill based
Yeah.
than the prior version, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Being
I
too
do
rule
think.
heavy for me.
Yeah, I do
That's
think
why
maybe.
Pathfinder is called Mathfinder, just so you know.
Yeah, that was one of the things that sort of turned me off when I was looking at 3.5 later. Is like, man, there's a lot of math involved with this. I think that and that's another thing too. I see where I do think 5e succeeds. Sorry, guys, is like the skill system associated with 5e, where like, well, and this is another issue of a DM problem. Whereas, as a DM, you shouldn't be making people roll for things all the time. But if there's something specific, it makes sense that they would have different skills. Like if you're a cleric, you would be proficient in religion, meaning you get a bonus to your roll for religion. Um, so that's good, but I don't but you could still make that roll, you don't have to be a thief to or a rogue to roll to pick locks in 5e, which I like. So I kind of like that compromise. I think that a lot of DMs ruin it by, I've seen them like, okay, get into like somebody says something, roll for insight. Like, hey, you have to roll for insight. Just let it go. Just if it's tough, or if they're asking like the history of an area, like if they live there, they would know the general history of an area. You just roll a history check when it's like something obscure, you know?
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that is I've talked
Yeah.
over the years, and I played 2E for probably 10 years, 11 years, religiously, basically, after 1A, because the groups that I played with always expected you to be on top of the newest edition of Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons, right? And that's continued throughout time until you lose a group of friends or whatever ends up happening to separate the group. But I still talk to the 2E bros, right?
Mhm.
And the 2E bros have the same basic argument, although they'll argue against something like 5E or 4E or
Yeah.
3.5 or whatever that all says the same stuff. These skills aren't designed to mean that you have to have rope use to be able to tie a knot, right?
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
tie a knot, right? You can tie a knot. I can tie a knot. You can tie a knot. Anybody can tie a knot. I've been around boats and been on the ocean more than a lot of other people I know. So maybe I can tie better knots. Maybe
Yeah.
I can't. Okay. But there's, it's really specific because they'll say, no, 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 no. You only have to roll that. It's not a skill-based system. You only have to roll that if it's an exceptional circumstance.
Mm,
And the same should kind of apply everywhere, but they'll
yeah.
argue against systems like 5e where the same does in fact apply, which is just more addition war type of stuff, and same thing with non-weapon proficiencies in 1e such as they
Mhm.
existed. They're just there to quantify somebody being better at
Yeah.
any specific thing than the other people around him, relatively speaking. I think where it kind of screwed up was with the passive stuff. Now I know that the
Yes.
passive stuff it was really just designed to say, okay, well, we've got this old rule where elves passing within 10 feet of a secret door might notice something,
Yep.
right? So they mechanized that basically and did it in a way that it could apply across a broad spectrum of classes and brought it under this banner of perception. Um, so I
Yeah.
don't really like the passive checks, and it just the last point is going back to what you said. Yeah, okay, maybe everybody can open locks. I don't expect the thief to go in there and open locks and stuff as hard as I expect the other characters to
Right.
go in there. If a fighter is going to try that, the fighter better have a damn good reason for explaining to me as his character what it is he's looking at, what it is he's seeing, what it is he's trying to do, how it is he's trying to do it. That knowledge isn't implicit as it is with maybe the thief, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, and I mean that's exactly the thing for me. Like, if your party wants to make camp for the night and they make a fire, I will never make you roll for that. But if you're in the middle of a thunderstorm and nobody has a tinder kit or some spell to ignite a flame, and and you're rubbing two sticks together in a storm in the woods, yes, I will make you roll for that. And to me that's more interesting way. When you were talking about the passive stuff, I think the passive stuff really became a problem due to bad DMing, where like they make you roll for everything. So then Wizards was like, okay, well, because like I think passive perception was early on, but then there's like passive intelligence, and then there's some other passive thing. It's like, no, you don't need that. You just stop making them roll for everything. Uh, like
Right.
um, like Gonzalo said, insight is a dumb skill. Insight's not a dumb skill. Insight's a good skill. The problem is everybody wants to use it like it's a lie detector test. And no, if you ask me, do you believe the innkeeper said whatever, I might make you roll an insight test, but what you're going to get is like you see him fidgeting, he's hesitating, or maybe you get signs that he's under a spell, like his memory's not all there. Um, maybe you see a little sweat come down the side of his head, but you're never going to find out if it's a lie or not. That's up for you to determine if he is. I just give you a little more clues to take a look at.
Yeah, 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 I agree, and I think of that in the same way that I think of something like diplomacy in
Yeah,
3.5, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
diplomacy. You're not going to walk up to a guy in any game that I run and be like, "Yeah, so I'm going to use my diplomacy to see if I can convince him of such and such." It's not going to happen. Okay, well, you fail. you know, um, no, you're gonna walk up there and you're gonna tell me from a role playing perspective what it is that you're trying to do. And then if you happen to be better at it, then whatever your roll on the die is, then it's going to be successful. Now, if the fighter wants to walk up and try the same thing and say the same kind of stuff, this guy might see through the charade, you know.
Mm,
So, and I think it's always kind of been that way with skills, but people like to um, look at them as a mechanic more than they are
yeah.
an accessory, right? It's a condiment, right? The
Yeah.
check,
And to me, the best is when those skills are enhancing role play. So actually in Empire of the Undying Sun, I have a skill tree system in there where originally it was based on the 5e version. So like let's say you have religion, right? You could put extra points into it and there's sort of four levels. The first level is the same for everyone, but then in the second level, it branches off into three things. For religion, you've got the path of the prophet, where you have extra bonuses when you're going out specifically trying to promote your god and like to promote their will and to get converts. You've got the inquisitor who doesn't get any bonuses to their own god, but they get bonuses against others. So, like, let's say you're
nice,
a lawful good paladin, you would get bonuses against evil creatures who with of gods that are opposed to yours. And then the other one is the heretic, where you have secret knowledge. You get direct extra knowledge from your god, but everybody else in your religion hates you. So
right, right,
'cause you're like, I'm doing it right and you're not. Um, so like by having those enhancements to the skills, my goal was to help people to really role play the character better. So they're meant to be like very the skill might be like universally applied, but it's like very tepid. It's like a very mild improvement, or like incredibly useful at incredibly specific times. um and it's optional. It's not required to use in Empire, but in both the 1e and the 5e systems, you do have possibilities.
yeah, and that's fascinating because that's something that as I continue to dig into these books and the philosophy of them and everything that I've done basically for my whole life now, I find it interesting. It's it kind of comes down to the I forget what they call it, the common phrase or whatever, that one man's trash is another man's treasure, right?
Mhm.
One man's holy is another man's unholy, and
Yeah.
that's something. So for the spell SRD that I'm working on, and I published the first two levels of spells, and it's really an SRD designed to be um, Creative Commons with no attribution to me unless somebody wants to, but the Creative Commons version of 1E that the CC BY license from WotC opens up to us. Um, I've decided to, I looked through some of that text and I've decided to replace it with the cleric's religious symbol
Mhm.
in case of, because I can write holy or unholy symbol,
Yep.
holy or unholy water, but it's something that I just contended with recently is that it's just their religion, right?
Yeah.
And their religion is nuanced, potentially even within the alignment that they play, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's no necessity that two lawful good clerics are going to operate exactly the same way because they have different deities, and
Yeah.
different religions.
So, I mentioned that it's kind of like Bronze Age where there's a bunch of different gods. So usually,
Right.
I'll have players make up their own gods, unless there's very few predefined gods in Empire. The Black Ram being, the biggest exception to that. But I'll have them create their own, and there's like some criteria that they'll have to uh, make for themselves. But uh, it's interesting because you can have multiples of the same kind of god at different times. Like I had three people, of course, wanting to worship death gods. There was like
Yeah.
a warlock, a cleric, and something else. Maybe it was a paladin. I forget. But at any rate, but one was worshiping one that was like Anubis. It's like when you died, this god took your soul to the other side. There was another one that basically ruled an underworld, and his thing was, I got to get these souls into my realm. When he's building up his army, and then the third one was all about like necromancy and controlling the dead. So in a good system, there should be a lot of variety like that. And, there's plenty of room for evil slash neutral evil, or it could be a death god that's really not evil. It could be one that's neutral or good. So I would urge DMs to sort of expand their minds when it comes to that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And then that's a really good point, you know. I think that's a really good point. And it's the same not only for necessarily priesthoods, but other orders of the realms such as they are. So you might have two different factions
Yeah.
who are lawful good, using the example of clerics with it being lawful good, two different factions who are completely opposed at their goals,
Yeah.
but they both have the same alignment and they both pursue their goals in the same manner. And I think that makes for really interesting campaign world building. Um, I mean, we see that in the best fantasy novels and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Gonzalo wants to know if he gets more power for each convert he brings.
It depends. There's also another system uh, that I call divine blessings. So divine blessings are available to any religious based class or anyone who has a very religious background. So you could just be a fighter who is extremely religious. And basically, what it does is so in the 5e version, uh, assuming you're playing on medium or above mode, there's no death saving throws, so death occurs at 0. But even in the 1e version, um, if you pray to your god, and basically they'll give you what's effectively like a mini quest, um, and if you do it, you get a divine blessing. And you can use that when somebody in combat dies. You can stave off death for one more turn. If you use a divine blessing, their god will favor you. So, like as you level up, the what you have to do for them um, changes. And I've got a table that you roll on, and there are some that are like get followers. If you convert people to worship that god, then that god will bestow that kind of blessing on you. And also um, there's stuff in the game that uh, should you choose to use it, there comes a point where um, people might start worshiping you because they think you're the reincarnation of a god. Especially in the later parts of the games, like the world is just sort of coming apart, and you've as you level up in 5e, your abilities and powers become more and more ridiculous. So people, would rightly start viewing you as like a miracle worker and certain things. So it's possible for you to get more and more followers, um, which you can send them out to do all sorts of other quests. You can send them out to form an army, basically, because the world itself becomes very factionalized. And in the last chapter, you you have to go to an area where there is a large amount of undead there. So the question is, like, thousands and thousands. So the question is, how do you go there? Do you take an army with you? Well, it's possible. And if you have followers, they can provide you with money to hire mercenaries, because there's the last chapter has a lot of wargaming potential should your players want to do that. Um, or your followers, you can take over some countries, potentially foment revolution. And then, if you help certain groups win, then they're like, yeah, then we'll help you. So gaining followers, worshipers slash followers, can be a very useful thing for you in the long run.
That's fascinating, and that brings me to two more questions for you. One, so it sounds like you very much, maybe not very much, I don't know, yeah, put it in your own words, that you designed this world first,
Mhm.
and it's really environment centric, and then it also sounds like it has a beginning and an end that could be replayed multiple times
Yes.
under different scenarios or
Yes.
whatever, but it sounds like a sort of a set of system rules wrapped into sort of a world paradigm that can and is maybe encouraged to have a beginning and an end to the arc. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So, in a lot of ways, I think of it as like World War II. Like, i- if you're doing a World War II tabletop game, right? You have a lot of options what you could do. You could have your guys be with the troops going over on D-Day, and then they could fight the battles straight from there. You could have them in Europe before the Allies invade. Maybe they're like, let's say you're part of the French Resistance, right? So your missions could be you're trying to assassinate German ranking officers, sabotage supply lines. Maybe you're trying to rescue scientists from inside Germany, get them out, or get Jews from one place to another. But as the battlefield changes, like, maybe you're in France before the Nazis take over, and then all of a sudden, now they're in control of France. So you have to be very careful. Maybe you're trying to get a scientist out of Germany when D-Day happens, and, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, great, there's no soldiers around. This is super easy. And then, oh, now we got to go through the front to get them back out. So for me, like, having a dynamic world is fantastic. And since it's a horror campaign, like I mentioned, the player's always on the back foot, right? So at least at the beginning. So at the beginning, in the first several levels, the players are really reacting to the world around them. They're definitely not in control of anything. But as the players go along and they start to understand, like, what the stakes are, and who's involved, then so it's meant to be from levels 1 to 10. So by the time you get to 10, you are making decisions that affect the fate of the world. Do you defeat that undead army? There's a lot of people who might still be alive and need saving in those lands. And there's I don't want to give too much away, but there's mechanics to where maybe you can stop the whole undead army and stop other things, or maybe in some ways you just have to defeat the army to keep other mechanics working. Let me put it that way. And that's directly things that players choose. And as they, move along in the world and build a reputation, it could go either way, because I've had groups that manage to piss off almost every single faction that they come across, and they, like, double cross them and all. And it's like when they come up on that thing at the end, it's like, well, you don't have an army. You didn't get the money you needed. So now you're going to have to SEAL Team Six it and try to go through thousands of undead.
Right.
Whereas, like, I've had other ones who are like interact more with the world and they'll pick sides that there's with all the factions, there's always like something good and something bad about them. So like you have to make the decision, can you work with these people? Can you not? But if you can, maybe you have to think like, well, I have to hold my nose a little bit for the greater good because we need a military. Or maybe you really do empathize with one group or another. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, very
It
very
sounds
changeable.
fascinating. Yeah, yeah, it sounds fascinating, and it sounds like you put a lot of world building work and love into it. So,
No, thank you.
when does it come out, and where
Uh,
can we get it for those of us who haven't backed or didn't back the Kickstarter?
Let me the Kickstarter is still up for the last one. You people could still order it if they want. I will send it to you in the private chat so you can
Yeah, yeah, and
post it if you don't mind.
I'll dump it in here. Yes, sir.
And sorry, just to continue that thought, one thing I wanted to say is with the adventure modules, one thing that I want to do with them is that we are like I said, the first batch reinforce or slot into areas between events in the campaign guide, or maybe before or after. So what the second round is going to be is like different starting areas. So you don't necessarily have to start in the South Bay area. You could start in the Empire of the Undying Sun, and the events of the world still happen. But now you could replay it, seeing what's going on in the other part of the world. And if you were a clever DM, uh, you could have the same group of people playing the same game, but being very low level in that other part of the world, having all sorts of different adventures that they don't realize crosses over into the sort of main quote unquote arc of the story. Until like they're right there at the end.
You're right, right, and I find that to be particularly fascinating. Um, it sounds really flexible, and it sounds like it's tied together enough with the mechanics that you can sort of deal with that complexity and that interconnectivity as the DM without really having to work too hard
Yeah.
to account for situations that haven't been accounted for. I mean, would that be accurate? So it's sort of. Do you think it's friendly to novice DMs?
I think so. And then I have advice in the back like uh, easy, medium, hard, and what I call chaotic evil DM mode. Excuse me. So like I sort of divide it up and like talk about different rules. Like if you're talking about the 5e version, like if you just want a simple story and you don't want to worry about it too much, everywhere, because there's several places where it says, do away with death saving rules. Just ignore them, just keep them in there. If you want something that's really challenging and really gritty, okay, then we're going to do that. We're going to replace the long rest mechanic. It's not 8 hours a day. Now it's you need to rest for an entire week,
Right.
and all these other things. And it'll be there for the 1E version as well. Um, so to me, I think it's really friendly. And then in the campaign guide itself, there's points where I talk directly to the DM. And it's like, hey, if your players went full murder hobo and killed this person, well, this person has all the information they need. So you need to create another one at some point. Or I'll mention things like, especially near the end of a chapter, like, hey, did they not find this item or did they not kill this monster? Okay, if they didn't kill the monster, then the monster's still there and it will kill some of the survivors from the undead invasion. So the amount of help that they'll have in chapter 10 is less. And things where it's very easy to slot it in. Did your players not escape from the undead invasion? Okay, well, here's the option. You can have them running around basically playing Night of the Living Dead for several months until a group comes from the other continent and picks it up, or you can have them, get out some other way, or you can have them leave the characters there, uh, have another group that's going to the other continent, and then just occasionally pick up with what the original character is doing. So I try to give recommendations like no, no good plan holds together or whatever. So
Right.
if you're a novice DM, there's lots of suggestions. If your players like totally muck up what's going on, don't worry about it. Just let them have fun. Uh, let them play, like let them do what they want. No need to keep them like on rails or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's fantastic, and it sounds really interesting. I've known a little bit about it because I've followed it sort of since the launch and whatnot, but I've never I've never really followed enough of what you say about it to sort of get uh kind of a bigger picture. And I like it. It sounds like you really tried to take it. Sounds very ambitious, first
Thank
of
you.
all. Yeah, yeah. Me and ambition, we have a love-hate relationship. I love it and it hates me. But I really like the holistic approach that it sounds like you've tried to take to the entirety of the thing. Like sort of it almost sort of sounds like you've wrapped it up into its own sort of standalone thing that you could basically just take on almost an SRD from anything and
Mhm.
use that as the basis of the rules,
Yeah.
while the campaign itself controls everything that happens within those rules. And I think that's a smart approach. It's a dangerous one because it could take years, right?
It
But
has. I started it in
yeah,
2017, so almost
there you
10 years
go.
later
Yeah.
now.
Yes. Yes, I'm sure it's paid very handsomely too.
But, hopefully it'll be out this summer. But, yeah, I know I've got an even more ambitious, sequel, in mind for when I'm done with this.
Right on, right on. Well, make sure to take yourself a break because burnout is real.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. I I
yeah.
I would caution you to be careful with that, Gonzalo, because there is no way that you will ever think of all the BS that your players could possibly do to screw it up. You need to like just figure out big categories. Like, did thing A happen or did it not happen? You know, did you kill the monster? Did you not kill the monster? What happens if you don't kill the monster? The monster's still out killing other people. Or maybe you could say another adventuring party did later. But if you try to do every little thing, you will not be successful. Just come on, think of what we do to Bill on Tuesday nights. That's times 10. That's what's going to happen. And that is also another reason why you should definitely test your games as much as you possibly can. Because you will find some things that you thought you wrote so clearly nobody's picking up, and then there's other stuff that like was just an offhanded comment or something that everybody loved, and you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to add a little more of that. um, and that's how you
So
know how easily people will break your game.
just to go back, and I know I've kept you for a really long
No,
time,
that's
and
good. I'm
I
good.
appreciate it. How much? What would you say? How much play testing have you done on this over the years? Are we talking
Oh God.
like so much that you're like, oh my god, or
So, well, it depends. So I've done, like a lot of the earlier chapters you could do in one day. If you're playing for like, let's say, a 6-hour session or something, you could do them in one day. So those have been tested a lot with various groups that I picked up from here and there. There's
Right.
been a lot of like fights, like, I'll be on Roll20 or Reddit or somewhere, like, hey, I need 6 people to test out like 3 fights. And we'll test those out, especially for all the custom monsters. Um, but in terms of test groups going through the whole thing, I've had 3 test groups. And there's been pretty big changes, after test group 1 and test group 2, because of course they're going to screw you up in different ways, and you have to
Right.
rewrite stuff. But yeah, so 3 that have done the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's impressive, and I'm sure, I mean, that's the kind of thing to me that if I'm writing something, it's sort of the journey that makes the journey enjoyable, right? Being
Yeah.
able to do that, and I had never thought that, or of just jumping on Reddit and be like, hey. Come check this out.
Yeah.
Anybody who's available in the next hour or whatever, or some Discord or something, come test out something with me. And it's encouraging that people will do that, and that's a kind of a nice support system to have, if you're building
Uh,
something like this.
Yeah, I have to say that the community overall is pretty good, especially if they don't have to DM. So it's
Right, right,
it's fun. And then it's good because when you're testing a game, you're not testing to see how good your game is, how fun your game is. You're testing to see how it breaks. And you
right,
want to allow people to do things that you normally wouldn't. And you want to, I mean, I don't necessarily want to TPK anyone, but I sure as heck want to get really darn close every time to figure out if the encounters are exciting and worth it for them. And then it'll sort of work itself out in the end, because you as the DM can tell by the reactions, like, oh, did they really get invested with this? Did they not? And then I also do have questionnaires that I send to them to ask. Um,
nice.
so yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you put a ton of thought and a ton of blood, sweat, and tears
yeah,
into this thing, and I'm
yeah.
glad it's been successful, and I hope
Thank
it,
you, thank you.
you know, uh,
Oh, as
it
to when I
becomes
started it
more.
just before COVID,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
because my first test group we had to take a break because of COVID.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As did many of us, which
Yeah.
is really unfortunate. But of course, it also led to the proliferation of VTTs, which
Mhm.
brought a lot of us back together for the first time in a long time. Which is, I mean, if if the whole thing has to suck, at least we got something cool out of it, right?
Yeah. I am looking forward to one day running this for funsies. Like, just for
Right,
fun,
right.
not to try to break it or, you
Yeah,
know
yeah. I'm sure. Well, I'm sure we've got people who would like to play. Um, so anybody have any questions for Yang? You have anything you want to and I apologize if I said Yang, and it's not
Mhm,
correct in either
that's fine.
northern or southern China. Um, or do you have anything that you'd like to talk about? I don't really know how to wind these down because I'll just talk forever. Is
Uh,
unfortunately what I'll do.
what do I have? Yeah, so, if you haven't backed it, go ahead and back it. I see some backers here. Don't worry, Michael, you're getting it and your box. Um, but, yeah, come back it while it's still available. Probably well, I'm definitely gonna shut down the Kickstarter um, I when it's good to go and I'm ready to send it off to print. which hopefully will be sometime in June, I hope. So
Nice.
back it while you can. Let's see. I see Michael's question here.
Yeah. He came back.
Well, there's a couple things. One is so I still have one test group going. It's the last one. They're just about at the end, and there was the infamous TPK with banshees. The question is, how many banshees are too many banshees? Six. Six banshees are too many banshees. Then the same group, there's a part where you're on the ocean, there are pirate adventures, and as one of their random encounters, giant crabs came on the ship they were on, and for whatever reason, the two people who were on guard duty didn't see a reason to call for help. They're like, "Yeah, we got this," and so they almost died. They eventually called for help, but because they were just about dead, and the people coming up, now there were too few of them, so they almost TPK'd there. I think two people died in that one. So those were pretty good. There were a few encounters that, oh yes, and there was one, there's this pyramid that reconfigures itself, and the party has to make a magical item. Well, I had like the guardian of this entire pyramid. Um, I forgot to give him a way to undo stuff. So I think like in the third round, like he was kicking their butts, and there were a bunch of mummies that were beating them pretty hard. And then they managed to polymorph him, and that was it. I didn't give him the ability to end polymorph. It's like, well, got to redo that.
Yeah. Well, the thing that stuck out to me, because this has happened to me on a number of occasions, is that I have been pinchered by a crab about this big.
Mhm.
Oh, and everybody knows that if there's a crab anywhere near you, you you either have a net big enough to cover it and know how to pick it up, or you call for help. you know, Imagine one of them things pinching your midsection. Forget it.
Oh, so Michael Dell asks, how many rations does one freshly boiled giant crab equate to? Well, actually, they're not very good for rations because they go bad quick. They're good for meals, but you wouldn't want 2 week old crab legs. You wouldn't want to eat that. But it is funny. I did allow one of my players to take the shell of a giant crab and make a tower shield, which I had special mechanics for that gave him, you get bonuses to hiding behind things. It was so big. He was such a goofball. He was a dwarf. He only had 5 feet of movement when he was carrying the shield. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm good with that. Because it brought his AC so high that it was virtually impossible to hit him. And he would just incredibly slowly march from one part of the ship to another to fight the enemies.
He was the 300 all by himself.
That's right. So I broke that shield quickly.
Yeah,
Or I should
I
say
would
he did.
imagine.
He was on some stairs. He chose to use it as a sled for no particular reason. And I had him roll. He hit a door hard and it broke.
Nice.
Good times. Good times.
Yeah, for sure. I suppose that's about it, huh? I think
Yeah.
I well, I want to say, first off, I appreciate you, showing up on my smallish little unassuming channel to share your wisdom and the greatness of your upcoming game. And I always enjoy talking to you, and I appreciate you having me on. The couple times you had me on, that was very nice of you. And like I said, working on RPGs is it sort of compares to IT in the sense
Mhm.
that it's kind of thankless and it's kind of lonely, but IT
Yeah.
actually pays better. Okay,
Yes.
you don't hate yourself as much, but you do get lonely, and it's nice to talk to other people who know, to let you know that they actually appreciate what you're doing. So thank you for having me on,
Yeah.
and it's been a pleasure to have you here and the audience and everybody else. It's a great time. And if anybody ever wants to come on, I figure I'll do these on Wednesdays. We'll call them table talk or something like that. And
Ooh.
you know, um, I'll just do these because I've got a free night, and I'd rather talk to people who are like minded than to do whatever else I might be doing at this
Oh.
particular time.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I
Pleasure.
definitely agree. Even if you don't agree with the game or the way people play the game, you can always learn something about, like, even if they're making choices that you don't agree with, what is it about the game that they're playing that they feel they need to make those choices? And I think we can all make our games a little better for our tables.
I agree completely. That's a take it on home, brother Clark. I mean, that's what that is, Reverend Yang, and much appreciated, sir. Always a good time and happy gaming. I guess we'll go ahead and close out now. See you, Michael. See you,
Mhm.
everybody else, and thank you very much.
Night, everyone.